Right. Shalom Uvracha, Erev Tov, good evening. We're here for the weekly shir on the Dvar Malchus, the insights of the Kabbalistic insights of the Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach on the weekly parsha. And as we already, it become customary to begin with a recording of the weekly story. And this story is an amazing story. And is all correlated. The story is correlated with this weekend. This weekend, which was the Shabbos, it was the Shabbos Mevorchim of the month of Kislev that we met. We blessed the month of the Hebrew month of Kislev, but it was the Shabbos HaShluchim, the Shabbos of Kinus HaShluchim, the emissaries of the Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach gathered together from all over the world, all over the United States, and from all over the world to the to 770, to Brooklyn, New York, to Crown Heights, Kan Tziva Hashem Es HaBrocha. Hashem has, as the Rebbe says that Hashem has blessed and commanded the blessing here in the Daled Amos, in the parameter of the Rebbe. And since it's the kinos, the gathering of all the shluchim, it would be appropriate to tell a story of the, I would say, infinite stories that exist with the shluchim of the Rebbe, with the emissaries of the Rebbe, but at least one story that will be able to be an exemplatory for all the shluchim and all the stories of the shluchim. And especially now, from Tafshin Nun Beis, from 1992, Chaye Sarah, the Farbrengen of Chaye Sarah, the Shabbos of Chaye Sarah, 1992, Tafshin Nun Beis 5752, in which Baruch Hashem, I personally had the merit of attending as a shliach at the Kinos HaShluchim that year, and the Rebbe in this outstanding happening comes and makes the following proclamation. The first and foremost, the Rebbe says that the service or the work of the shluchim, as it was till then, has come to its culmination, and from here on, the only thing that is left is to prepare ourselves and to prepare our environment to greet Moshiach Tzidkenu in actuality. Okay? So therefore, what the Rebbe says is, the Rebbe says in these words, that every single thing that we do from there on, from Chaye Sarah, Tafshin Nun Beis, has to be imbued with this special new service, this new dimension of the service of the Shliach, which is to prepare ourselves and to prepare our environment to greet Moshiach Tzidkenu in actuality. When we put tefillin with another Jew, when we put tefillin on ourselves, when we go and we, whether it's mitzvah of tzedakah, mezuzah, of lighting Shabbos candles, whatever might be the mitzvah, it all has to be centered around the new shlichus, the new service of the Jewish nation from then until now and further notice, which is, like we said, to prepare ourselves and prepare our environment, our fellow Jew and our environment, to greet Moshiach Tzidkenu bepoal mamish in actuality. The next thing, which is maybe an even greater revelation than the first, which is that it's not only incumbent upon those shluchim that were appointed by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, and by the Rebbe himself, the Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach, to go out and to fulfill these directives. But today, and this is going back 1992, Chaye Sarah, every single Jew in the entire world is a shliach. The Rebbe uses the expression of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, of the Rebbe's father-in-law, meaning every single Jew in the Jewish nation is a shliach of the Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach. And therefore, this directive is not something that goes to a certain channel of the Jewish nation, not only to the Shluchim that were appointed officially, but to every single Jew, because every single Jew is actually now a Shliach. And what is our directive from the Rebbe? That every single action, every single mitzvah that we do, everything, our prayers, whether it be davening or our Torah study, it should all be centered and imbued with the one kavanah, the one intention, to prepare ourselves and to prepare our fellow Jew, our environment, to greet Moshiach Tzidkenu B'Poel Mamash, in actuality. Getting to the story, going back quite a few years, we're talking about maybe the early years of the Rebbe, the Rebbe's Nesius, the Rebbe's leadership. The Rebbe went and actually appointed Shluchim to be the heads of different countries, to be the heads of different states in the United States. Among them was a Rabbi Shimke or Shimon Lazarov. Shimke Lazarov was the head shliach of the state to the state of Texas. Okay, and in those days, people, you didn't have too many resources to be able to get support. And we're talking about monetary support for your work in the states or in the countries that you found yourselves in. So therefore, the shluchim would come, and they would also be by the Rebbe, but at the same time, they would be doing fundraising in Crown Heights, in Brooklyn, in New York, wherever there were Jews that were in the position to help and to assist. One of the times that Rabbi Lazarov made it to the Rebbe was Tishrei. I would say probably the end of Tishrei, going into the last days of Sukkot, Simchas Torah, because otherwise he would be needed in his own state to go into to organize the Jewish congregation over there, wherever there in Texas. It was already after Simchas Torah. He was sitting by one of the close gvirim, close well-to-do people in Crown Heights, and people would enjoy his just to have his social presence, to speak to him. He was a very witty person, and he had a lot of wisdom, also Torah wisdom. But he really knew how to merge everything all together in a package deal, the Gashmius and the Ruchnius. So as he was speaking, the Gvir, the wealthy man, looks at him and he says that he sees that he seems to be preoccupied. Something seems to be worrying him, and he admitted, yes, there is something that's bothering him. He says that there's a project that he wanted to get off the ground, and he literally committed himself to go into this project in Texas. But for the meantime, it's not progressing. He's not getting anywhere. So the Gvir, the wealthy man, looks at him and he says, "I'm very surprised. A person like you, the first thing that you do, from my knowledge, is you probably would write the Rebbe for a bracha." So Rabbi Lazarov looks at the Gvir and he says, "Yeah, this is true. I wrote the Rebbe." No, and what did the Rebbe say? He said to the person, the Rebbe didn't give a reply. So the guy opens up his eyes wide and he says, "The Rebbe didn't give you a reply? That seems very odd." So Rabbi Lazarov says, you should know that sometimes the fact that the Rebbe doesn't give a reply in writing doesn't mean that the Rebbe isn't answering your request. And even more so, sometimes the reply in writing is bounded. it's within the confrontations of the material world. But here, if when the Rebbe doesn't give a reply in writing, so the reply is unbounded, it's infinite. So it's a much more beneficial reply than the reply in writing. And he was thinking positive. He was a very optimistic person, and he's a very strong believer and great trust in the Rebbe. The Gvir, on the other hand, looks at him in the eyes, and he says, "Listen, Shimke, once upon a time, when the Rebbe started his, when Chabad started here in Crown Heights, so it was just a handful of Hasidim. The boys, there weren't that many yeshiva students. So the Rebbe knew who's who, and the Rebbe had personal contact, more or less, with the Hasidim. But now, look around you. Everything's grown, everything's expanded. And with the numbers that Chabad, that the Rebbe has to deal with, can you blame the Rebbe for not being able to keep up with the pace? Chas v'sholom to say such a thing, but this was what the Gvir told him. Can you? Do you really think that the Rebbe knows who you are, or he still remembers exactly who you are and what you're asking for? What's your request in life? So. At that spur of the moment, Shimka Lazarov wanted to just, give him fire and brimstone over the head to this Gvir, even though he knew that it might be a forfeiting a very nice fat check. But to go and to speak like that about the Rebbe, that totally negated the belief and the trust that a chassid has in the Rebbe. All of a sudden, the phone in the Gvir's home rang. Great. The phone rings, saved by the bell, as they say, and the Gvir goes to answer the phone. He answers the phone, and he looks at Rabbi Lazarov, and he says, "Shimke, it's for you." and he gives him the phone. Now, Rabbi Lazarov couldn't imagine, like, what? Someone's calling me in the Gvir, in the wealthy man's home. It's like, it's a little embarrassing. It's a little shameful. This guy is giving you his time, and afterwards he's going to give you a check, and you're asking people. Then there were no cell phones, no mobile phones. What's going on here? So he gets the phone and he listens, and the person on the other side is a friend of Rabbi Lazarov, and he tells Rabbi Lazarov that he's really apologizing for calling, but he knew that at this moment, Rabbi Lazarov went to visit this wealthy man, this Gvir, and he didn't think that Rabbi Lazarov wanted to lose out on this great opportunity. What was the opportunity? He told him that the Rebbe called for a surprise for Brengen in 770. A surprise for Brengen in honor of the guests that are going to be now, after Tishrei, going to be leaving from 770, from Crown Heights, and they're all going to be returning back to their homes. And therefore, he's calling to tell him that at this moment, all Crown Heights, all Brooklyn for that matter, has been mobilized, and they're all filling up in 770 for the Farbrengen of the Rebbe. Okay, he says, "Thank you very much," hangs up the phone, and he tells his friend, the wealthy man, "Come with me immediately." He says, "Where?" So he says, "Come now, we have to go to 770. He says, "What do you mean you go to 770? He says, "The Rebbe is making a Farbrengen now." So the Gvir didn't think twice. He put on his hat and jacket, and he went out the door with Rabbi Lazarov. They walk to 770. They enter the building downstairs, and Rabbi Lazarov sees that 770 is filled from one end to the other. I mean, as fast as his friend tried to call him, the place filled up, immediately. And then Rabbi Lazarov is thinking to himself, ay, what kind of a chassid am I? What kind of a shliach am I? I come to the Rebbe's Farbrengen and I have a regular suit on. A chassid comes to the Rebbe's Farbrengen, he wears a sirtuk. He wears a long coat, a long black coat. He doesn't come with a suit, And then, if that's not enough, he's thinking to himself, and now 770 is filled from end to end. He usually had a permanent place, a place that was his place in the benches, right below the Rebbe in 770. And here, since he came late, so his place was taken. And there was no way that he was going to go and plow through all the people that were in the at the beginning in order to get to his place, and who would let him go into his place? So he tries to situate himself at the end of 770, and he stands there, and as he's standing there, the Rebbe ends the first sicha. The Rebbe ends the first talk of the Farbrengen. No, not in the natural course of the Farbrengen is that after the Rebbe ends a talk, so the Chassidim start a nigun, and everyone raises a l'chaim to the Rebbe. People are raising l'chaim to the Rebbe, and Rabbi Lazarov is standing in his place, and he's like totally within his thoughts. What's going on? I'm not dressed appropriately in honor of the Farbrengen. I don't even have my place in the Farbrengen. And then all of a sudden, if that wasn't enough, the Yetzer Hara places in his mind another thought. The thought that he heard from the Gvir, from the wealthy man back in when he was visiting in his home. And he starts thinking, you know something? Maybe the Rebbe, perhaps it's possible that the Rebbe doesn't know me anymore. The Rebbe doesn't have an awareness of who I am, where I am. I'm thrown so far away in Texas, down south. Who knows? And he had these, it's called like sfekas, doubts in regard to his trust and his faith in the Rebbe. At this point, all of a sudden, the Rebbe gives a look towards the spot where Rabbi Lazarov is standing, and the Rebbe says, "Nu zog l'chaim, zog l'chaim." The Rebbe says, "Say l'chaim, say l'chaim." And Rabbi Lazarov, with all his thoughts, he's looking around because he sees the Rebbe, but he's looking around to see who's the Rebbe speaking to. Who is the Rebbe pointing at to say l'chaim? And he's looking to his right, looking to his left. If that wasn't enough, all of a sudden the Rebbe speaks to to one of the secretaries, and the Rebbe's secretary says shouts out to the across the hall, across the Farbrengen hall, Shimke memeint dir. Shimke, and he repeats himself. Shimke memeint dir. Shimke, that was his name, Shimon. The Rebbe means you. Shimke, the Rebbe means you. Say l'chaim. He was like in a very embarrassing situation, and all of a sudden, without even speaking, Chassidim bring a big bottle of wine and a little cup. They pour it in the cup, and he stands and he says l'chaim to the Rebbe, exactly the way Binyamin is showing. But the Rebbe doesn't say to him l'chaim. The Rebbe looks at him and he motions with his hands like this. I don't mean to make a l'chaim on a small cup, on one of these shot cups. Make a l'chaim on a big cup. So immediately they grab the cup, the Chassidim that's standing next to him, grab the little cup away from him. They stick in his hand a big cup. They pour the wine until it's overflowing, and he timidly and innocently he raises his cup and he says to the Rebbe, "L'chaim, Rebbe," almost literally with tears in his eyes, because he knew what was going through his mind a moment before the Rebbe pointed him out, singled him out, and told him to say L'chaim. And with tears in his eyes, he said L'chaim to the Rebbe. Then the Rebbe nodded and said L'chaim, L'chaim u'levracha, and he drank the wine. But when we speak about the concept of a shliach, there was a famous story that once there was a little girl that came with her parents to visit by the Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach. And when she was there, so she was looking around. They were seated by the table, and the Rebbe was known to take out, whenever she had guests, the best of her china and ware and so on. And the little girl's looking around, and she looks up at Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach and she says, "Hey, I don't see that you have any children around." And as we know, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin didn't have children. But then Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach tells the little girl, that all her children are not home at the moment. So the Rebbetzin asks, and the little girl asks, "Where are they?" So Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach says, "They're spread out all over the world." And she says, "Who are your children?" And the Rebbe says, "These are the Shluchim. The Shluchim are our children." So when we're talking about a father, no matter how many children a parent might have, there's no such thing as neglecting or forgetting purposely, intentionally, about any of the children in the family. And how much more so when we're talking about the Rebbe, who is not just a father to the children, to the Shluchim, and not only the Shluchim that he appointed, but from 5/7, 5/2, 1992, the Rebbe says that each and every one of us is an appointed shliach of the Rebbe. Each and every one of us is a lone child to the Rebbe in the Rebbe's eyes. This is the uniqueness of the Kinus HaShluchim, the gathering of the Shluchim, all the years after that. Knowing that we are Shluchim, the emissaries of the Rebbe, knowing that we are the children of the Rebbe, knowing from the story as we heard, that the Rebbe doesn't forget any of his Shluchim. The Rebbe doesn't neglect any of his children, and he has them all in his awareness. He's thinking about us constantly, night and day, day and night. And with this, Bezrat Hashem, having said this, knowing that the Rebbe is thinking about us at this very moment, we come with the request, we come with the demand, as the Rebbe has told us to demand from Hashem. We come with the request and the demand that we want to see our Rebbe. We want to see the Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach immediately now with our eyes of flesh and blood. And it should be teichef umiyad mamish on a good and revealed basis, with the happiness and joy of the heart immediately now. Yechi Adonenu Morenu V'Rabbeinu HaMelech HaMoshiach Le'olam Voed. L'chaim Levracha.